Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming an actor, a singer, and someone who has been voicing her thoughts on her country of origin, Iran, which is, as we all know, at the center of a storm.
You may know Elnaaz Norouzi as the actor who played Zoya Mirza in Sacred Games, the sassy Iranian bride in Made in Heaven, or Sheena Asadi in Gerard Butler's Kandahar. But beyond the screen, she is a fearless star who doesn't shy away from sharing her opinion on public discourse central to Iran.
Our people, our loved ones died standing for freedom for the country, and we're going to celebrate that. They're saying you can take our people, but you cannot take our spirit.
Norouzi, who is fluent in 7 languages, was born in Tehran and later moved to Germany, where she started working as a model when she was just 14. A leading critic of the politics and policies of the Iranian government, Norouzi has long called for a democratic Iran. She is known to leverage her social media influence and share her perspective on several issues, including her personal encounters with the morality police. A vocal supporter of the woman life freedom movement, Norouzi has consistently advocated for women's rights and freedom of choice.
Women are not allowed to travel without their husband's permission. Women are not allowed to get a divorce easily if they want to.
At a time when Israel and the United States are at war with Iran, Norouzi is channeling the voice of many Iranians. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elnaaz Norouzi.
Please welcome Elnaaz Norouzi on stage with a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Elnaaz.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yes, a round of applause. She's been voicing her opinions and her thoughts fearlessly. That deserves a round of applause. Okay, so, there has been so much conversation about what has been happening in Iran. You've been talking about it. But before I go into the politics of it and what you have been speaking about, I want to go back to that 8-year-old girl who left Iran. For those of you who don't know, Elnaz was born in Iran, and then her parents had to leave when she was 8 years old. She's been brought up in Germany, and now she's working in India. I want you to tell us what that Iran was like. There's a lot of conversation about what Iran was like and how it is today, but not many of us know what it was like that time when you were there. So take us through that, the eyes of that 8-year-old Elnaz. What did she see there?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me and for finding it important to hear an Iranian voice that was born there, that lived there, that still has family there, because I think in today's day especially, this is very, very important. Going back to the time when I was born in Iran, when I was born under a dictatorship, for us back then, it was, of course, very normal. Everything that was happening was normal in the sense of what everyday life is. But the more I grew up and the more I started understanding, of course, when I was around 4 or 5 years old, the conversations about leaving the country, fleeing the country, had already started in my family. I used to remember how my dad and my mom would constantly talk about where to go, Canada, Germany, And then I remember I turned 6 and I started going to school. And the first thing on the first day of school that they made us do was line up in school and chant "Death to America." This is something that I did not understand back then in that time. And I was always wondering, why are we chanting "Death to America"? And what is America, right? As a 6-year-old, you don't really know what's America, right? So I was very fortunate to come back home to a family that understood that this is not what we want. We don't wish death to America. We don't wish death to Israel, and we don't wish death to anybody. This is not what we know. So I grew up with that understanding, And I know that a lot of other Iranians also had those families, which is why now, after 47 years, you still see Iranians standing up against this regime and saying, this is not what we want. So this is what happened in school, and I would always retaliate. I was always a rebellion. I always thought, I'm not going to wish death to anybody, you know? And I would be beaten up in school. I changed, in the 2 years that I went to school in Iran, I think I changed 3 schools because my mom did not have it. My mom did not like anybody beating her child up just because she was not wishing death to America. It was a terrible time, even with the little that I understood as a 6 or 7-year-old. And then, of course, we fled Iran. My dad tried going to Canada first. It didn't work out. And then we chose Germany. And I just remember the time when we were in Germany, we had to flee. We were seeking asylum in Germany. And I had a time in my life, which is when I was around 8, 9, 10 years old, where I was living in a refugee camp, because that's what was given to us, and that was the only thing that was saving us from the country that we had to flee because we were not feeling safe there. And then I had to find my way when I was not belonging in the country, where I did not speak German, I did not know anybody. I was the only one with brown hair, where everybody else was blonde. And at that age, when children are very, very mean to each other, I had a really tough time in Germany. And sometimes when I look back, I'm like, how I wish that my country was a free country and I would have stayed and I didn't have to leave and go through what I went through.
So Elnaz, help me understand this. When you were at home, your parents were giving you the freedom to live the way you want, to think the way you want. But when you went to school, there were restrictions, particularly for girls students. What was the experience like?
Well, first of all, as a child, especially as a 6-year-old, you are allowed to walk freely in Iran. You don't have to wear the hijab. But when you go to school, even as a 6-year-old who is going to an all-girls school, you still had to wear the maghna, we call it, which is also a form of hijab, but for children and for when you go to school and, you know, university and everything. So it is I remember I was very irritated with that thing on my head for hours and hours during the day. We would feel hot, we would sweat, and we would just be like, I don't want to wear this. You know, you're 6, you don't understand much. You just want to be free in school, you want to play, you're a child, you want to live life, right? But we were forced, even at 6 years old, to wear the maghna. And I just remember, me personally, I didn't like it.
And so when you heard the news of a 23-year-old Mahsa Amini, what was the feeling like?
See, as an Iranian, we are already very angry since 47 years, right now. But at any time that you see, we're already very angry with what's happening with our country. And then you hear news of a young girl dying just because her hijab was improper. It was not missing, it was improper. The Iranians, as you saw, they were furious. They came out on the roads and they were like, first of all, we don't even want this hijab. On top of it, you're killing us because it's improper, as per what you believe is proper. So that was another uprising after another uprising that had happened, after another uprising that had happened a few years before. There are multiple constant uprisings in Iran that are being blocked by force and by killing. I was furious too, and I was so happy that I had social media and that by that time, my social media and my platform was big enough to be like, hey world, listen, this is what's going on in my country. They just killed a young girl because she was not wearing her hijab properly. And I used it. I used the platform. I hope that people are going to listen. I hope that people are going to understand what's happening in Iran.
You know, when you talk about this little girl who was scared to leave her country and then was forced to live in another country, and you're talking about the kind of difference that you felt. What happened in Germany? Was it tough? Was it easier than perhaps your home country where, you were feeling suppression?
Of course, in Germany, we had freedom. It was tough in the sense that you had to leave your entire life behind and go and start a new life in a country that you don't know, with people that you don't know, with a language that you don't know, with surroundings that you don't know, without your family, right? Well, I was with my mom and dad, but my mom and dad were very young, and they did not have their mom and dad or their sisters and friends around. So that was the tough part, but what was beautiful was the fact that we were then in a free country where we could choose what we wear, where we could choose what we say, where we could even, as foreigners who were now living there and taking help from that country, we still had a voice and we could still speak out against the regime, against the government. And that's what was beautiful. It was so weird to us. We were like, oh, we're allowed to say that? We're allowed to say that we don't like this leader? It was new, but it was what the world should be.
So, talking about what has been happening in Iran, Elnaz, you've been voicing your opinions about it quite strongly and clearly at that. But there's a large segment of population that still supports the current regime. And what you talked about, whether it's the hijab or the other kind of restrictions that you perhaps felt in Iran, they still find support in Iran. What do you have to say about that?
Well, of course, we have 92 million people in Iran, and even though by the survey of Gaman, you will see that more than 80% of Iranians are against this regime. If you have 20% of 92 million, these are still millions and millions of people who support the regime, and that's okay. I don't think that in this whole room we have everybody agreeing with the government of India right now, right? You vote, somebody's for it, somebody is against it. Some people have voted for Trump, some people have not voted for Trump, right? He doesn't have 100% votes either. And that's what we say. Of course there are regime supporters, but isn't it that the majority should be choosing their leaders? And if the majority is choosing to not have this regime, why can the majority not choose? Why is a supreme leader chosen but not by the Iranian people? Why is a president chosen but not by the Iranian people? Why is there an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps that is protecting the revolution but not the Iranian people? Why is there a Basij that has to keep the people in control? Because they know very well that the people are against the regime. Otherwise, they wouldn't need force. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to kill more than 50,000 people within a month, right? So they know themselves very well that the people are against them. Hence, they have the IRGC, hence they have the Basij. Otherwise, Iran would be free right now.
Sure. So, Elnaz, while we speak about this, there are also people who are saying that, look, all of this conflict has been happening, but look at how they've targeted school children. Look at how they've attacked a school. What about that? Why aren't people talking about that?
Yeah, people are not talking about that because people don't know that that school was and is in an IRGC quarter. My question is, how many schools do we have in India that are within 100 meters of a military base? Why do you have a compound that was inside an IRGC quarter? You take that compound out and you make it a school. Why do you do that? Why does the IRGC constantly do that? Why does the Iranian regime constantly put children and grown-ups, forget about just children, into these positions? Why did they make that part of the IRGC compound into a school? Why does Hamas go into hospitals and fire from hospitals, and when they're firing back onto the hospitals because the Hamas fighters are there, then they cry that they targeted a hospital? This is the oldest trick in the book of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Okay, so where do you see this now moving forward? Because, you know, Iran has been giving a retaliatory response that has been lauded by a lot of military experts. Sure, we don't know, you and I are not there on the battlegrounds, we don't really know the strengths and weaknesses of Iran as well as America and Israel at the moment. Militarily, I mean, you know, we wouldn't know really what's really happening.
Oh, we do know, yes. We're Iranians. My friend who is an Iranian is here. We're Iranians. We know exactly what's going on ground.
What is going on?
They are all dead. And they have no idea what they're doing. They're just shooting in the dark.
Elnaz, there are leaders who are coming on the streets. They are talking about how there needs to be...
You're talking about Larijani, who had come on the street and he died last night.
Not just Ali Larijani. You saw the crowds, right?
Yes. Yeah. The crowds were there because they were not shooting at them. But what about the crowds who came out in millions, but they were shot at? Did you see those crowds?
Okay. I get your point and I absolutely understand what you're saying. And therefore my question is, how do you see this moving forward now?
The only thing that is going to happen is that the Iranian regime is not going to give up, because they have always said that they're not going to give up, and they have always said that if we have to go, you all have to go down with us. They came on state TV and they said, if anybody speaks out against us, they're going to be killed. This is how they are threatening their own people on state TV. And they're also showing exactly what they said they're going to be doing. When they said we're going to take everybody down with us, that's what they're doing. They're targeting Oman, they're targeting Kuwait, they're targeting the UAE. They say that they're targeting the American bases, but they're firing at banks, at civilians, which in fact the Americans and the Israelis are not doing. They're targeting IRGC and Basij bases very, very well.
Okay. Okay, so I'll leave it there. Elnaz, it's been a pleasure talking to you and understanding your perspective, not just as an adult, but as the 80-year-old who left Iran. Thank you very much. We'll leave it there. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Elnaaz Norouzi, who's been honest, who's been candid, and very clear in her responses in what she thinks about the West Asian conflict. I'd request Mr. Raktim Das, CEO Z Media Corporation Limited, to please felicitate Elnaz and extend our token of gratitude and appreciation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.